Hello. Hi, Gabe. Hi, Uma. Thank you so much for joining me today at Purple Hats 2022. It's lovely to see you both. Why don't we go ahead and start with you, Uma, first? Say hello, a little bit about you.
Hi, everyone. My name is Mahesh, and I am a CISO for Prime Healthcare Services. I manage 44 hospitals, 300 clinics across 14 states, and I'm also a co-founder of a startup, Linda, and also, I'm an entrepreneur and an entrepreneur at heart.
All right, and one headline for your philosophy around cybersecurity or staying ahead of threats.
So I think to stay ahead on with the cybersecurity these days um, is to find the blind spots that you have, right? Meaning, you're looking for your shadow IT assets out there. It could be assets as well as liabilities. So constantly watching them and then keeping ahead, trying to stay ahead of those. I think is the key.
All right, so the headline is finding your blind spots and staying ahead. Okay, thank you. Great to have you here. All right, Gabe.
Hi, so I'm Gabe Lawrence. I'm the VP of Cyber Protection at Toyota. I focus on the technical side of cybersecurity, covering our enterprise manufacturing and a little bit of our products as well. I guess I'd say my headline is things are always changing, both in your environment and in what the bad guys are up to. And so, we need to build with awareness that everything is different all the time.
Mm-hmm. Why don't we jump right in? So, how do you keep up with threats? What are the strategies that you employ inside of your own organizations, inside of your own teams? Why don't we start, Gabe, with you and share your thoughts?
Sure. Yeah, I mean, this is the challenge, right? Because everything in cybersecurity is different all the time, and it's changing at an extreme rapid pace. And you need to be aware of what's going on in your environment and what's going on in the world and what's the new research, and understand, contextualize that into your environment and understand what the impact is, and continuously evaluate that and get a good understanding for the new techniques, the new tactics, the new technologies, both on the attacker and the defender side,
Mm-hmm.
and figure out how they can really help you secure your environment.
Mm-hmm. That's excellent. I know, Uma, you mentioned shadow computers, and uh, that can be a challenge when it comes to keeping on top of threats. What are some of the strategies that you employ in your organization?
Sure. So continuously inventorying, discovering, inventory, monitoring and act. Right? It's like a vicious cycle. You can never stop with these four. You're always looking. I mean, you're looking for what you have in the environment. It could be, like I said, the assets. It could be the vulnerabilities. How do they apply to the business? How critical are they
Mm-hmm.
to the business, or how critical are they to the, to the cybersecurity posture, the threats, right? And as part of this, threat hunting also becomes a plays a critical role in here. Uh, so, I mean, as per SANS 2020 threat hunting survey, 85% of organizations are adopting or at least embracing the threat hunting these days. Uh, so,
And how do you, because there's so many vulnerabilities, tens of thousands of vulnerabilities, how do you actually figure out which ones are most relevant for you? I mean, do you kind of balance risk as part of that equation?
yes, yes. So again, I always believe in, first thing to address these vulnerabilities is identify what you need, and the rest just don't just turn them off. Don't run them on your network or in your organization, right? That's number one strategy I always believe in, or would at least like our team to work at. It's not that easy. Finding what's not needed and turning it off is not that easy, right? But again, we should be striving towards that. With that, an organization will reduce drastically the threat attack surface by eliminating what's not needed. Uh, so that is a primary goal, right? I mean, uh, in healthcare, healthcare terminology, right? We don't want to be a pharmaceutical company where we are just we are patching the symptoms, right? We want to be looking for a root cause and solving that rather than trying to patch a patch and then that will have another 10 patches.
Yeah, I think it's key, right? Understanding your attack surface and managing your assets and understanding what assets you have, then mapping those into the overall protections and vulnerabilities that come into play, right? So, this week there's a new spring remote code execution that's going around, right? Mm-hmm. So you need to understand, how bad is it? What kind of exposure do you have? And to do that evaluation, understand where you have spring in your environment, which can be hard to find, right? And that's where that asset management piece comes into play. Mm-hmm. And then look at it from the risk is exactly where you need to go from there, right? And understand, is this quick to hit the emergency stop button and power everything down in kind of impact? Is it limited and in scope, and who has a ability to access? Mm-hmm. What kind of countermeasures can you put in place around it for protections? Can you protect with WAFs or other technologies? And then use that kind of measured approach to understand what your response needs to be and inform how quickly and what kind of impact you need to make in the environment to fix it.
Mm-hmm. So it sounds like what I'm hearing from both of you is you need to be looking constantly, but yet you have to figure out how to be looking for the things that are relevant for you, which can be challenging. And we're talking a lot at the conference about a threat-informed defense and really building layers of defense and detection and response capabilities. Any thoughts around how to do that?
Right. So a multi-layered approach is a very effective approach, right? Again, and when you are looking at a multi-layered approach, you have to start off with again knowing what you have, right? And how critical is this to you and the business? I mean, when you say to you, meaning the business, and how do you? I mean, and then how and the risk associated with it, and how do you secure? What controls you place, right, to secure that particular asset. Now, these assets can be, it could be a printer, server, camera, desktop, or Word document. It could be an employee, a C-level, or a janitor, or it can even be a URL or a domain name. As simple as that, right? Or an SSL that you have as because I've seen in organizations, there's a lot of expired SSLs that run on your network, when exposed to internet, right? So, yeah, multi-layer is the way to go, and again, that is only effective when you know what you have.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think, I'd add to that, there's always new vulnerabilities. There's always something that's going to happen. And it's really about sort of understanding the overall set of steps and tactics that people will take once there's been an issue, and being able to build that visibility, build the response capability, and then so that's stuff that you can do all the time, and you can be tabletop in that, and you can be practicing that. This is where the purple team comes in, right?
Mm-hmm.
So take those standard tactics that the bad guys are always using, make sure that you have the visibility you need to see what's going on, make sure that you have protections in place for those, simulate that, test it, know how it appears in your logs and know what's going to happen. And then when there's a new vulnerability, right, that may offer a new finger hold for someone to get into your environment. But once they're in, they're going to do the same things every time, right? So you have, I think at that point, you have the advantage as a defender if you've done that preparation and you've mapped your environment and you understand what normal is, and you can start watching for those things. And I think that's the discipline and important part that you need to have as a defender is sort of keep that execution going.
It's really interesting that you mentioned vulnerabilities. I saw an interesting stat somewhere along the way that only 3% of breaches actually come from vulnerabilities, right? And actually the bulk of breaches that happen from due to human errors or processes, or gaps. And I'm curious what you think about that, because when we see the headlines, we think that breaches are coming from these big attacks, but what's your experience?
So for any cybersecurity operations, the interplay between people, process, and procedures is the key, and for the agility, right? So vulnerabilities, yeah, you're right, Julie. Vulnerabilities alone is not the threat out there, right? It could be, again, your weakest link in inside the program is people, right? The constant testing, the constant testing ourselves, our controls, how effective they are. Gabriel said, how effective they are. Keep monitoring, measuring, and then going back to the drawing board and filling those gaps up is the key. I mean, those threats, as one form, could be vulnerabilities, but that's not the only. That's not the only thing to look for.
Yeah, it's fun to talk about the new vulnerabilities and ODAs and things like that catch a lot of the media, that catch a lot of mind share. But the reality is that the real defenses are kind of the boring, just do the stuff right. Make sure you have your MFA turned on and enabled for all of your users. And that's the key right there, is that all of your users, right? Not this population or these people that didn't get registered. It's you've got to get to that 100% execution on each one of your controls and monitor and test that. And it's not flashy. It's process and it's people work. It's not some kind of amazing thing, right? And then look at the tactics, look at the things that the bad guys are going to do. Once they've got a user account, they have to escalate. So how are you doing privilege account management? How are you monitoring the use of privileges accounts? Have you made sure that local admin is restricted in your environment? Have you scrambled local admin passwords using something like Flaps? Do you test that it's still healthy? Because that's the other point. You may get it right at a point in time, but to my theme, everything changes. Chaos chaos is the normal, right? Everything's trying to trend towards more chaos. And if you're not watching, the next thing you know, one of your controls is broken and you think you're fine. And instead it's now that finger hold the attacker can use to move in. And then there's discipline with patching and just keeping up with all of those things, right? So across the board, it's sort of that focus on good execution, I think, is the message.
Yeah, that's what I'm hearing. So it's not necessarily about a 0-day attack. It's about bad passwords, patch fast enough, and a lot of the basic IT management.
I mean, you of course, I don't want to say don't pay attention to those things when they come, right? Because you have a small window when there's a VPN vulnerability or something like that to be able to address your issues. But it's really that exercise muscle of executing. You have your regular processes, you have your emergency processes, and you standardize that. And so for each one of those new vulnerabilities that comes out, it's just, okay, run the procedure, do the stuff. Actually, you've been training that muscle. Now it's time to use it.
So to Gabriel's point, Gabriel's point, we do 80% of the same stuff, 20% we go out of a norm, and but it should be the other way around. We should be doing 80% of the new, looking for things around there, automating, your operations, and 20% you should be, efficiently taking that 80% and then combine that into 20% and just focus on that, right? So that's where we should get to, and that's what I think will make the cybersecurity operations much more efficient and smooth going forward. We're not there yet, but there are a lot of all these new technologies that are helping us. Hopefully, we get there.
Totally agree, Uma. I think having that automation and orchestration piece to help make that practiced effort just run smoothly and easy to do, and then you put the brains, the human brain on the interesting, unpredictable stuff, right? Where we're good at thinking about, what is the new stuff and discovering stuff. People tend to be less good at the repetitive tasks, right? So.
Which is, a great segue. So you're both using breach and attack simulation with the MITRE ATT&CK framework. Could you each share, why this is an important part of your strategy or your technology stack?
I can't stress enough how important it is on that topic, right? See, how do we excel in something, right? The one way that we do that very well as humans is when we know, when we know that what is out there or what could go wrong, then we can start putting, controls around it to secure it, right? And the way to get to that point is, simulations, right? That simulations could be like purple teaming, blue teaming, whatever you want to call them, right? Or tabletop exercises, regular tabletop exercises. Again, if we don't measure ourselves continuously, and it's not a one-time thing, if we don't measure ourselves continuously, we wouldn't know where we are, and that journey is left, halfway. We're not doing justice to what we are hired to do to the organization, I would say.
Yeah, there's a great, just to jump in real quick, Gabe, before we go over to you, there's a great expression that you can't manage what you aren't measuring, right? And so if you're not doing that kind of constant vigilance and monitoring, then how do you know that you're improving your security posture over time?
Exactly. Yeah. Josh, my CISO, who I work with, he's always using the idea of everything that we look at has to have an X of Y, which means you kind of have to define what is the known space, what is where are we within that known space of accomplishing our goal, right? So, I use breach and attack simulation to really get to this idea of, at the beginning of a project, we have a target or a goal. And we know how many things are out there. We know how many we've instrumented, and we can start watching, sort of getting to that healthy point where we feel like whatever our target of X of Y is, we're there. And so, you can use this to actively test your execution on putting that control in or setting up that detection and see how much of your environment is covered. And then once you've reached that goal, you're out of the project to building stage. You're now in the maintenance phase, right? And it's, how do I know that this thing stayed healthy? We built it, but chaos is trying to get back in, right? So did someone change a firewall rule somewhere and now my logs aren't coming in? Or did someone, there was high CPU, so they turned that agent off on that machine and now you don't have visibility on that critical asset. You need to keep that measurement going, and you need to keep that testing to make sure that those controls stay effective over time. And so, you can use it at that time when you're building the thing to test, your where you are in that project completion. And then once you're done, you convert that into a maintenance metric, right? This needs to stay healthy. And you can watch and see that that metric continues to stay where its target is. And it becomes very valuable to find those things before someone else does, right? So you can fix it and you're not surprised. You're not in that situation of, I thought we did a project so that no one could get into our environment this way, and now we're having an incident because that thing rotted, right? Instead, you can proactively interrupt that cycle and put that control back to a healthy state.
Yeah, Uma, so you've talked about finding your blind spots, and I would imagine with having, this lens of visibility across your assets, it may also help you figure out, do you really need to patch something or should it be decommissioned too?
Right. Right. Yeah, that's where knowing what you have and what you need is the key, is the critical piece that determines the path, right? That lays the foundation to it. Yes. Yeah. I mean, we cannot just blindly patch it. Whenever our team brings vulnerabilities, I tell them, do you really need these things? Do you really need these services to even, first look at that, talk to the owner of the system or the application, and then decide if this is, that needs to be patched or not.
And what's your take on using the MITRE ATT&CK framework in conjunction with a breach and attack simulation platform like AttackIQ's? Why is that helpful?
So MITRE ATT&CK framework gives you a foundation or a path, sets a path to look for things in the areas that are mapped for your organization, right? It gives you a framework to start with, but again, I mean, it does lay a very good foundation, right? But that, I would not, I mean, so that is, I mean, the ultimate, but again, as, I mean, people again, process has to align with it. But MITRE ATT&CK framework gives you that framework to start with, to get a head start, and look at the critical pieces and how do you align and all that. Yes.
I think it helps give you a map or a roadmap for the people in the process side, right? Like you can look at a technology placemat and kind of go, okay, you need to have a DLP, you need to have this, we have all those things in our environment, but then on top of that, why are they there? What are we looking for in them? How do we understand, there's a blinking light. Is it urgent or important? And it helps you sort of wrap some of that contextualization around why this light might be turning on, what kind of activities is it detecting? And then from there, what's the next step that an attacker might take? And can I contextualize that and go, we see this pattern and now we know there's an active incident going, or maybe this is, something else, right? So it gives you sort of the things to look for and to evaluate your tool set and your coverage, either whether it's a protect or a detect kind of tool that you have in place. You can build that people and process around it to execute.
Right. So, and again, to Gabriel's point, right? It gives you a point to look. It tells you what to look for and where. But how effective is it? That's something where we have to test it, right? We have to measure ourselves. Again, a particular vulnerability could be a very big for organization A, but doesn't mean anything for organization B.
Yep.
So
yeah, exactly. And it could be hard, right? It could be hard to know how to test these things, right? You not everyone gets to have a high functioning red team that can go ahead and write their own exploits or something like that, right? So being able to leverage a tool that knows how to do different tactics that you can then put into place, and you can look at the MITRE ATT&CK thing and go, okay, I'm going to follow this line of steps through that process to get from the initial exploit all the way to data exfil and long-term persistence, right? And I can see which ones of my controls are doing which of the tactics along the way. And then when something new comes out, I can evaluate what do I have and what tactics is it using, and I can map that straight in and be able to say, oh, this is bad, we don't have something for this, we need to get on it. Or, oh, we have controls, this is not so bad, we can pace ourselves in our response. And kind of have that informed decision making in how do you respond. It's not a panic, it's a controlled response, right?
And if you weren't using automation, which has transformed so many industries and so many organizations inside of industries, how would you constantly monitor? What's the alternative?
you'll be throwing people at the problem left and right. um, Again, in cybersecurity, I mean, see, manufacturing, automation has been a very key role, and it's a very matured area. But cybersecurity is there are a lot of moving pieces, and things are changing, right? Like Gabriel said, things change every minute here. So when you're automating things, and there's so much variables in the mix, automation is not. We can 100% automate, right? And there are areas where you can't even automate, more than 30-40% in cybersecurity. And there are areas you can automate 50-60% of that, right? Especially the log, correlations and things like that, right? That can be automated. So yeah, automation is the key. But are we there like the manufacturing is? No. Will be there in next 10 years? Depends on how good our friends on the other side, the the attackers, how creative they get. So, but again, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's the key, right? Is if you don't have automation in place, you have your people spending all of their time watching the known stuff that you've practiced and making sure that stays effective. I don't no tool, no automation is perfect, right? There's going to be places where you have to add some stuff onto it. So the idea, I think, is you have your stable stuff that you want to always be doing. You want to make sure that stays working. Automate that. Then you have the new, the new attack appears. That's time for where your people need to spend their time and understand what can I add to my existing automations. What controls? How does it all appear? What processes need to change to deal with the new thing, and kind of keep your people focused on that and then pushing the stuff into this continued monitoring framework that allows you to know that your environment hasn't decayed.
Mm-hmm. I think that's smart, given the lack of, talent that we see just due to the shortage of bodies in cybersecurity. You really have to figure out ways to survive without having as many bodies, as you'd like to have in your organization. All right, let's switch gears and talk about. We've talked about, I think, strategies to be agile. Some of them are not flashy, some of it's just basic IT, good hygiene. We've talked about, automation, breach and attack simulation, using a framework like MITRE ATT&CK to help test, TTPs. Let's talk about the confidence side of the conversation. You both must be asked by your leaders, by your colleagues, by board members, XYZ just happened. Could this happen to us? How do you confidently answer that question?
We have to be prepared. So you're constantly working with your team, doing your research, keeping up with what's happening out there, and then again pushing your team limits, looking to dig deeper into this before your management comes to you and asks for that question. You have to be prepared. You just cannot wait for them to ask. Go and look for it, right? That will be bad. A lot of again a lot of due diligence, I would say, and keeping up with these things is very important.
Yeah, I mean, I think the way I think about it, right, is if you think about the incident response process, there's the flashy part that everyone focuses on that's kind of in the middle when you're actually fighting fires, right? But at the end and the beginning is this: what did I learn from this thing, and how do I prepare? And most of your time is in that preparation stage, as Uma was saying, right? And it's how do you look at what's going on? How do you understand your environment? How do you track your assets? How do you how do you see if one of these new things that comes along that someone's going to ask you, how does this impact us? Is it actually new? Or is it a variation? Is it something that missed? How does it map into that MITRE framework and the processes that you're doing in your preparation? And is it a gap that we need to fill? Well, then you've just got a great moment to turn around to your board and say, hey, there is a gap here. This is a new thing, and we need a surge, and we need to build something. Or you can say, look, here are the things that we've done before that fill this hole and allow us to say this is a non-event for us, and it gets that conversation going outside of an incident response time, where you can see what is the value of the investment that you've made into cybersecurity, right? Because that is one of our biggest challenges in cybersecurity, is that everything's great until it isn't, right? And the success time is, nobody's talking to you because there isn't a problem. That's what you're there for, right? Like, the successful cybersecurity person is on the golf course all day, right? Now, none of us get to do that, but that's really what you want it to be. And it's a little bit hard to understand once you start, if it's running, we don't have an incident, what are we spending this money on, right? Becomes part of the question. And there is a direct answer to you're not having an incident because you are spending this money, but you've got to be able to track that down and show what you're getting for these things. And that's where these frameworks and the measurement pieces come into play, that you can really show the details and understand the X of Y's, like what is our environment and how much of it do we have covered.
Right, and in addition to that, right, compliance also, it's needed to show them that the due diligence that we are doing, the constant improvement, right? Whenever these governing bodies come in for an audit, they are not looking for a perfect environment. You will never find a perfect environment anywhere. What they're looking for is this continuous, constant improvement. So if we can prove with the tools that we are measuring ourselves, we are doing we are trying to fix the gaps. I mean, we are identifying the gaps and fixing them, right? That is all they are looking for.
Yeah, that's a really great point. It's really being able to show that it's not just that panic reaction that happens when there's a new vulnerability, right? It is that continually turning the crank that the team is doing that's the value, right? And so you can use these things to take that conversation of, hey, I read about this spring thing in the newspaper. Do we have a problem? You can turn that around to this discussion of, we don't, and here's why, and here's the processes we have, and here's what the people are doing that allow us to say that. And that's the value that you're getting for this organization that you've built in your company ongoing, and just be able to have a very solid answer to those kinds of questions.
I'm curious, the past 2 years have obviously been challenging with COVID, and I'm sure you both had to pivot and try to figure out how to have people working remotely where they weren't before. Were there any particular lessons learned around staying ahead of potential ransomware or cyber attacks, during the last 2 years that you'd like to share? Or any surprises,
Yeah, remote work has opened up many challenges, which we were not prepared, right? We are across 14 states. We have, people working from, outside the US as well. So, again, to keep up with that, what's happening locally in the states and beyond, across the country, the different time zones also doesn't make any easy, right? And the remote work has opened up a lot of, it has changed the way we should be thinking on a cybersecurity, from a cybersecurity point of view. We're still in a catch-up mode with it. Right now, people are coming back to offices, but you never know, right? We don't want to go back to the same situation and look for, like Gabriel mentioned, not look for when we need it, right? We want to be prepared this time. So we have done a lot of progress on that, and definitely that area has been very sensitive, especially in cybersecurity side of it. And keep the business running and balance it is challenging, not was, is still.
Yeah, so I at one point in my career, I did cybersecurity for an academic institution, right? Which is a very different environment, and there's a lot of openness, there's a lot of interconnection. And one of the things that I always said then was open doesn't mean insecure, right? It means you have to invest in how do you make that environment more agile and more easy for collaboration. And I think that really sets a foundation that helps you when you move into this idea of remote work, right? Where it's no longer physical location isn't part of your security model anymore. And honestly, the reality was it shouldn't have been to begin with. It's not that hard to fish your way into a company, right? Phishing is generally 100% successful at some point in time, depending on how you measure it. So saying everybody in the building is a good person isn't right. It misses the inside threat. It misses the successful fish. It misses the drive-by that gets into your environment and starts moving. And so if you start thinking instead, like, what does it mean if my workforce can be anywhere? It changes what kinds of detections and what kinds of protections and what kind of response capabilities you need to have. And what's hard is to pivot that way quickly in a day because there's a pandemic going on, which is what kind of most of us experienced 2 years ago. And I think that hard change that had to happen really quickly has given some advantage to the ransomware actors who are, taking advantage of us for sure at this stage. But we need to sort of keep developing that direction and building out that flexibility in our environment because in the long term, the kinds of protections you build that lets people work from anywhere really increase the overall level of security and resilience that your environment has, whether or not people go back to the office.
And to add that, right, to what Gabriel said, in some industries, like especially in healthcare, I started building a telemedicine application, which I sold. I built it in started in 2014. Now, pandemic expedited the telehealth adoption drastically, uh, you know, 15, 20 times than from 2014 to 2019. So the way that we work, so my point is the way we work has changed and will change further, right? There's going to be a huge change in the way the people will work and where they work from, and right, and on top of it, how do we secure it? Because we are beyond the boundary now, beyond our walls, right?
Yeah, I think, one of the things that's really clear is technology is the business, right? Like, it doesn't matter what you do, your business is 100% dependent on the technology. And that technology needs to be flexible so your business can be agile. And so that means your security model needs to allow for that agility and that flexibility. And you get that with this idea of remote work or zero trust or beyond corp or whatever buzzword you're calling it at the moment, right? I hate to use those words because in the market they've been so overused at this point they almost don't have meaning. But the idea of understanding your assets, understanding their health, understanding who's the person at the machine, what they're trying to access, and then making a policy decision about do you allow that to happen is extremely powerful. And in none of that did I say anything about location, right?
That's right.
I mean, it could help. Like maybe you don't have any business in this country and you see a user logging in. That's definitely an interesting indicator, right? But it doesn't have to be the only thing that you're looking for.
That's right. All right. Well, we're coming up to the end of our time here. So just as we close this session, and thank you so much to you both for sharing your insights. And I know you're coming from two different industries, but it sounds, like the challenges are very similar, whether you're in manufacturing or healthcare or, even in financial services, right? There is a shortage of talent. There are opportunities to automate. you need to stay on top of your, your IT hygiene, while, using, your smart, talented brains in the team to be thinking about what could be next, and staying ahead of adversaries. Are there any last closing thoughts that you would share around strategies for agility, strategies to build confidence that you are secure? Can you ever actually say, we are secure?
Again, I don't want to throw new thing here. I'll go back to the basics. Know what you have and what's important to your business. That's the key. Once you master that, everything will fall in place.
Yeah, I mean, I think operational excellence is a key element of what we need to be able to do to succeed. You need to find the right balance for what flexibility and agility you want in your business, and find a balance between protection, detection, and response that matches what you're trying to do, and consciously define how you're doing that, and then make sure that stuff works. And then, you can never be 100% secure, but you can be confident that you'll detect the problem before it's damaging. And that's really the fundamental goal.
Well, thank you very much, gentlemen. Thanks for joining us, the second annual Purple Hats Conference. It was my pleasure to host you both, and I look forward to seeing you this time next year, too. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you very much. Appreciate it.
Thank you.